How you guys doing? I'm Nigel, junior business major from DC.
My name is Chibueze Micro-economics, Prince George's County, business management major.
And we're here with Frank Shaw Johnson, Morehouse man. How you doing today?
Doing well. How about you guys?
Doing pretty good. Just semester's winding down.
I know y'all ready to go back home, huh?
Yeah. But can you tell us a little bit about your experience at Morehouse and how you got involved in the cannabis industry?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first, Morehouse has kind of been like a family school. So I've had about 10 to 12, cousins, distant and close cousins that have attended Morehouse, cousins that have attended Spelman as well as Clark, and siblings. So Morehouse has definitely been like an institutional university or college for my family, being that they're from Georgia. I think my journey to cannabis first started with smoking it, which, although typically has been, deemed socially unacceptable, I always kind of saw the value in the levels of the relaxation elements of it, as well as some of the focus elements that it provided. But I think my foundation getting in cannabis started with being a political science major and kind of just monitoring politics, and getting into policy. So, I started, I worked in professional sports for a while. I worked as a PR manager for the Oakland Raiders. And then I dove kind of, deep into politics and worked for a mayor and ex-NBA All-Star. And did a lot of his economic development projects, as well as managed family grants for foundations that were trying to do reform in the education space. And then I pivoted to working in the legislature, where I was a legislative director for an African-American senator out of Los Angeles. And I helped write transport. Well, I just was trying to figure out what was the next pivot. Education reform movement was kind of slowing down. You could see that the unions were really tackling it. So my goal was to see what was the next policy, the new, splash policies that would be impacted and that would be moving forward as, hot topics. And so when I joined the legislature, I started focusing on, obviously, criminal justice reform and things that, are near and dear to me because I'm African American. But then also transportation legislation. So, bills related to, licensing for ride-hail or ride-sharing platforms like Uber and Lyft, and then cannabis policy. And so cannabis was legalized in the state of California in 2016. And that's when I kind of started really becoming a wonk in cannabis policy and really focusing on the different languages and the iterations of the regulations as they were being crafted in kind of this immature cannabis legal industry. And I started trying to figure out and identify ways where people who've been impacted by the war on drugs could finally get into the cannabis space. So I think the theme for me was, I had a problem with us being locked up for it and then now being locked out of the actual legitimate cannabis legal space. And so I wrote California's cannabis equity bill. So it basically apportioned money for the first time for the first time in California history, money was made allocated for the legalization of a drug and not for the criminalization of it. And so we got money for, fee waivers, as well as access to capital and resources in terms of helping people set up a sustainable business. And since then, man, I think the sky's the limit in the cannabis space. So I've been working it currently since then. I worked in the legislature for 2 years working on cannabis policy, and then I became a government affairs manager for Ease Technologies, which is the world's largest cannabis delivery company. And we've completed 5 million deliveries up to this date, and we're consistently growing. So that's where I'm here now, sitting in our office on Embarcadero in San Francisco.
Wow. Well, congrats on all of that. It's
Thanks,
really
man.
cool. And so we know the cannabis industry is growing by the day. It's one of
Right.
the fastest growing industries in not just America, but the world. So
Right.
How is the industry supposed to grow within the next 5 to 10 years?
Man, well, currently right now, to be honest, the industry is not in great shape. I think the rules, it's one of those things where, like, naturally in most businesses, or industries, there's an understanding of the business aspects of it, right? And then everything else is kind of framing the political framework for those businesses to operate within. It's the reverse for cannabis, where it's like, yeah, everybody wants to fucking grow weed and sell it, right? Sorry about the cursing. Everyone wants to grow weed and sell it, but it's really more about your political positioning as a cannabis company right now, because the politicians don't know enough about it. The business entities like the tax boards and the food and ag, they don't know enough because it's so immature and it's just recently being regulated, that you have to position yourself in a very good political space where politicians and city leaders think you're doing goodwill and you're actually helping, rise all tides so that all ships can float, as opposed to just focusing on your own business outcomes that ultimately may even hurt the industry as a whole. So I think, a lot of companies are having layoffs all up and down the state, around the country, other cannabis companies, because one, you also can't bank it, right? So it's hard for, CEOs and finance departments to, speculate and analyze potential growth and need for capital and credit and things like that when you can't get credit, right? So you're always cash strapped and cash light, and you're always kind of moving around all your different verticals, because at some point each of them is going to need more gas, which is the money, and it's hard to kind of come by because the regulations are really making it hard for cannabis companies to remain sustainable. So yeah, in 5 years, it'll be much better. It'll be cooked out. A lot of the guys that are in here now will probably be out. A lot of the bigger business companies, Philip Morris and stuff, will probably be in. And I think to a certain degree, it feels like a lot of the policies that are being handed down are negatively impacting those that are already existing, for maybe the later outcome of the bigger guys kind of just coming in and buying up all those guys that are on life support. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of where it is. It's a very, very fickle and kind of uncertain space the cannabis industry is in right now, to be honest. Very uncertain and very up and down.
Well, what percent of it is owned by African Americans?
Less than 2%, I'm sure.
Wow.
Yeah, less than 2%. And I mean, even the cities that have the equity programs, they still ain't giving no license out because people are trying to piggyback off these equity distinctions, and white companies are partnering with black people who ain't got the money to run the company but can get the license. Or you got people cheating the system in terms of the lotteries. Or you just have cities that don't even have enough funding to roll out the licenses. So it's just, at every level, there's some barriers and some issues. And then I think the biggest issue is that you can't bank it, right? So like, ultimately, you have to beg people to be able to process payments for your cannabis company, because these banks are like, well, federally it's illegal. You may mess up our FDIC protections and things like that. So then you have these companies that basically are always jockeying and trying to reach out and try to find people who will process credit cards and process their cash and hold their cash without the fear of them dealing with like federal ramifications for doing so with cannabis companies.
Wow. Well, how will this new legalization affect the economy positively and negatively?
I think big pharma might take a hit.
Okay.
But I think positively, it's a whole emerging industry. It's at its infancy, right? So I can only imagine how, one, it'll provide different alternatives for medicinal outcomes for people that are seeking medicinal outcomes. But I also think it has the potential to get our people back into the business of farming and growing stuff, which we're really good at and we're trying to run away from. I think it'll also provide cities and states with money to help people of color that they typically griped about having to spend, because it provides extra buckets of money to help serve these communities. So a lot of cities have built out specific kind of payout programs based off the tax yield they get from cannabis that have to go back into urban cities that have been blighted by the war on drugs. I think cannabis also provides the opportunity for people to really understand that to smoke weed and be white was like, you weren't criminalized. It was a privilege. You were privileged enough to not really have to worry about going to jail about it, and we all did as African Americans. So I think it allows a level of awareness too about what the war on drugs did and who who are benefiting from not being impacted by the war on drugs, which are these white companies that can get all this capital. So, I mean, I don't really see any negative impacts to it. I see more money. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Which stimulates our economy because recessions are cyclical and it's going to happen at some point. And with a new industry to kind of help keep the recession from, balance it out. I think it's overall, I think it's great. I think it'll benefit the economy because more colleges will be able to get funding from the state to develop cannabis programs and, cannabis business profiles and cannabis, coursework. So I think there's definitely more positive than negative, but I just think as long as the regulatory process kind of mucks up the process, the big guys can come in later with their big cash and buy up all the little guys that kind of took all the bullets for them.
Okay.
So as someone who's experienced like cannabis before, how could someone get first involved in the cannabis industry legally?
Well, they have a lot of cannabis like recruiting and job pipeline stuff popping up around California. They got stuff like LeafLink and a lot of different entities that that you can put your information in, and you'll hear job postings and things like that. I think also, reaching out to some of these bigger cannabis companies that you've seen and asking for if there's internship opportunities, right? I always believe like when you're coming out of college, yes, you do need money, but sometimes you got to pay it forward. You know what I'm saying? You get your little credit card and survive off that, but in the back end, they'll see how much value you add, and then they'll really want to pay you. Because I mean, at this point, money's so tight in the cannabis game, you really don't want to pay nobody until you know they can actually do the work.
Right.
Because layoffs are so serious. But yeah, man, I think it's just reading. I mean, reading where you're from, like the local. I mean, I know y'all from D.C., so you already know Maryland is trying to get it legalized adult use. So is D.C. They didn't decriminalize it. So it's really kind of like figuring out what people you can locate or identify in those cannabis regulatory cannabis departments and fucking working for them. Because what happens is all the cannabis companies got to come to them and ask for licenses and stuff, right?
Right.
So after a while, if you become the filter between them and they license, and they're like, well, shoot, this joker can help us get the license better than anyone else can. He can consult us on that, you know what I mean? Or he wants to know about the growing aspects of it. Well, he can tell us exactly what they want to see in terms of zoning and planning at the city level in order for us to get a license, right? So then you become kind of an agent, like the filter between the decision maker at the city level or the regulatory level, and the filter between the decision maker at that level and the guy who runs the cannabis company, or the guy who's in charge, or the lawyer who's in charge of getting those licenses. So really reach out and identify the cities that are, the cannabis companies that are already operating in your state, and figure out where the policy hub for that stuff is. Right? Like, where are the decisions being made in order for those companies to operate? And once you get in them spaces and kind of state your claim as to what information you think is necessary for people to know, and you just start hoarding that information and be like, oh, I got you, but this is what it cost a month. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You touched a little bit. You touched a little bit about internships and stuff like that. Do you know any internships out there available for anyone seeking this type of opportunity?
Man, you know what? To be honest, I don't. I mean, our company has them from time to time, but like we're in a very weird space. Well, not a weird space, but we're in like a transition time right now. So we've been kind of trying to, hatch the doors down and kind of just work with what we got.
Right.
But I mean, I was thinking about trying to like develop a pipeline of internships for college students who want to work in cannabis companies in California. But the reality is, man, is that these companies are so cash strapped. Free labor is going to always be offered, be helpful, but people also want to be able to potentially hire you after you've shown your value. And I just think right now that the cash is so light at the entry level that it's really hard to kind of gauge what the hiring practices are. Most people that work for cannabis companies have either worked in different industry, kind of beverages or things like that, or have worked in politics where they can kind of navigate the rigmarole of policies and regulatory structures that allow these companies to operate. So I really think it's more, you actually have the ability, you guys to kind of even help craft or develop that pipeline your damn selves. I mean, I think that's another super big pipeline that cats is looking over. It's like, yeah, they want weed jobs, but who didn't develop the freeway for you to get on and drive to the job? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that's very big. I think brothers need to just get together and start reaching out to these companies and ask, like, listen, you know what I'm saying? I come from a very good university. I'm very interested in adding value. I'm interested in working in the cannabis space. Where can I, and how can I help, with the goal of hopefully one day being offered something in the space. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I mean, you really got to damn near leap on faith, get your resume right, you know what I'm saying, get enough good references, and just kind of start cold calling and seeing. And you know what I mean? Because really, these companies also just need they know if you black, you know about weed culture, that you're just a full square. Right? And not even if you aren't a full square, but like, you know what I mean? Like, if you know about it, and then you know about our culture, and you know what we like to see, and you know what we like to hear, and like it's invaluable in these companies because they're really losing on how they market to us. Wow. You know what I mean? And so they need that insight. They need people in the room that look like us. It's just like you know, Gucci or any of them brands where they put somebody with some Sambo lips on a sweater because there's nobody in the room that looks like us, right? Yeah. So they just think that shit's cool. Or there's someone in there who's just happy to be in the room, and it allows them just to abuse him for the respectability politics of it. Like, well, he's got a job and I want to lose it, so I'll let you disrespect my people. You know what I mean? So I think it's important that to, you know, bring your authentic African American perspective to these cannabis companies because they're not run by us anymore. And the cats that are running them, I know them. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And they're very few and far between. And most of them already had big guap from different industries.
Right. What are some type of cannabis companies or products to start investing in?
Well, right now, because of all this vape craziness, is flower. Companies with top tier, top shelf fire. You know what I mean? Those are the ones you really want to work with. You want to also work with companies that have some type of digital footprint where they can sell analytics and data to different brands so that they know who wants what and when they want it and how they want it. So like really kind of those conduits between the people who grow the stuff and the people who get it to market, right? So like there's a lot, like, you know, Ease, there's Acreage, Harvest, Viola, that's Al Harrington's company. Matt Barnes got a brand called Swish and one called Seven Leaves. I mean, what you really could do is just go to the California Bureau of Cannabis Control or whatever state you live in where it's legalized or medical and go down the list of licensed cannabis companies, right? They'll have a name and then they'll have like a DBA, right? DBA as such and such. But you can just go online and find that registry and reach out to them and see what their investment profiles look like. Because right now, a lot of the companies you can only trade cannabis in Canada because it's not federally legal here to bank it. So a lot of people, and them stocks are boo-boo. They're not worth anything. It's off inflated valuations, suspect financial operations, suspect leadership. So like they're basically penny stocks with not any true traction yet. I mean, stuff will really start popping once America switches its lane. But yeah, I mean, the Canadian kind of like penny stock stuff, you can do it, you can buy some, but like don't expect any crazy dividends. And if anyone's telling you a crazy, 40% return, then it's all sham. You know what I mean? They just, and that's another thing about the industry. There are a lot of connivers and liars and shapeshifters. You know what I mean? A lot of lawyers getting here, duping people, stealing their products from them, stealing their company from them, and all that type of stuff because it's still so young. So you can really be a pirate out here if you want to. So I would tell you, on the investment tip, wait until the federal banking starts going, and once that starts going, you'll start to see some of the big guys rise to the top. You know what I mean?
So pretty much not until it's legal across America.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Unless you got big M's. And then you can just throw a little bread to a Canadian company that's about planning on moving into America, or a company that's in America but is really operating just with cash, right?
Yeah.
And then you can invest because you got big M's. So it's like, well, look, I'm gonna throw $5 million into y'all play, and something gonna happen. But if you're just trying to boost your portfolio on weed stocks right now, it's not profitable.
Okay. And also, you mentioned politics in cities where you currently live. So what about cities like Atlanta that are currently transitioning? So it's not legal, but it's decriminalized, but it's not
Right.
decriminalized like it is in DC. It's still looked at almost like a crime here, um, and but you can see it transitioning, if you know what I'm trying
Right.
to say. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you know why weed is illegal.
Right.
It's to put us in
In
jail.
jail.
Okay. It says to put us in jail, stop us from getting school loans, put something on our record, tap us into the system that they can keep their thumb on us for the rest of our lives. That type of shit, right?
Hmm.
And so with that, I think it's just really important to, if you can, advocate and expose the situations where people who don't look like us are still freely serving tree. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, I think you got to just go into the policy sectors, go into where your representatives, African American representatives who care about restorative justice, and you start pushing positive cannabis legislation to them, things that have happened around the state, things that they can do, the economic impacts, the charge, how much it costs police, how much it costs the city to process these bullshit weed charges. Excuse my language, guys, but
No,
that's
it's
just.
okay.
Um, but like, I think that's where it starts. You know what I mean? You got to tell them, like, listen, man, like, don't be so churchy that you continue to let us go to jail as if God said weed should send Negroes to jail, right?
Yeah.
Because that's not what he said, and for sure that's what they're doing. So I think, I mean, from your guys' point of view, if I was you, I'd go try to work for one of these city council members or one of these progressive cats that are in the legislature, like even like that El Hadi guy, the senator from whatever part of Georgia, Henry County, where these guys are like, they get that we're going to need a slice of the pie, and so it's important for guys like you, like I did, which is to start researching all the different cities and all the different mechanisms and frameworks that people are trying to create to legalize cannabis. Like, because it's been decriminalized in California for a while, right?
Okay.
But they had medicinal and the decriminalization. They didn't have like adult use or what they call recreational use, where you can just buy it if you're 21. You don't need to have an ailment. But yeah, man, it's just really getting into those spaces, getting into those political hubs. Like, if you could get into like a city, like a state like Georgia, or a city like Atlanta with the progressive kind of pro weed, pro reverse the raw drug war on drugs person, everybody's gonna have to come to you in Georgia to get anything done or get any license or get any insight as to what the government's about to do. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it positions you in a place where you're the filter between those who want and those who do. You know what I'm saying?
You're the plug.
You're the plug,
Yeah.
plug talk, literally, plug walk. No, literally, that's exactly. I mean, that's what me and Josiah really are. Like, it's just like, listen, we just nerded out. We would literally popcorn read policy with a blunt. Like, okay, I'm gonna read this section. You hold it, J. Okay, my turn. You hold it, J. All right, for sure. Roll another wood. All right, cool. All right, now we know this. Now let's say it back to each other. Okay, Gucci. And then after that, it's like, who else could? Mother come to me and question what I know. I'll give you the whole code section. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's where you really want to position yourself. If you can't get in it with the cash, if you don't have like family liquid wealth to try to get your own license, which you can if you put enough money together of your friends, right? Come on, y'all from DC. I bet one of y'all was in Jack and Jill too. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I was, and I know, like, you know what I'm saying? I'd be tapping all my aunties when it's my plan to make the weed play. You know what I'm saying? I'm hitting them all. Like, I need 100K. I don't come by mama's house no more.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's kind of one of those things, man. Like, if you don't got the capital, you got to get into the political capital space and really make a name for yourself as being the strong young black man who wants to advocate for us and let us get into the space that we deserve to be.
Okay. And this is probably gonna be our last question.
Okay.
How does the growth of the cannabis industry affect other major economic powerhouses like the prison industrial system or the pharmaceutical companies?
And that, I mean, to me, that is the sweet spot that I'm trying to figure out myself.
Okay.
I'm like, how are they going to counterbalance all these lack of jail bodies they're going to get, right?
Yeah.
Or how many people they're going to have to let out, expunge because of this type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Well, California mitigated that by also shutting down the private prisons.
Okay.
And so what we're realizing in California and in America is having prisoners does not add to our GDP the way we want to, and we're getting left behind in terms of competing with the world on every academic level because we're treating one group good and we're letting the rest fall to the wayside, and so now they don't have any skills. Now they're in prison, and now da da da. Right. So I think, I mean, I wish I knew, man. Like, I wish that there was enough data to kind of know. I'm waiting for it. Like, my older brother's a law professor at UCLA, and he's doing like a whole study on like the economic impact of the war on drugs, right? From the prison side to the capital to the GDP to the workforce type still, and like the economic stimulation of certain communities. But I mean, there's just not enough data, man. I mean, I would speculate they're gonna come up with something else.
Yeah.
Like they always do, right? Like I think it's also now. Before it used to be like, oh, you get a charge for smoking weed. It's a moral thing. You do your little 2 years or your 6 months. You're on probation for 3 years, right? But now when you're selling tree and you ain't got a license, you playing with tax dollars, and the government is gonna get all their money all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I start thinking it becomes more of like a federal prison play. Like the state prison play on the drug stuff may slow down, but the federal prison play is going to be the one. Because listen, if you owe money, they're going to get it about you, and you're going to do 80% of the time no matter what. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that may be the case. But I mean, just to give you some insight, the legal market is thriving in California. It ain't slowed down, it's been ramped up.
Right.
Like, because it's making it so hard for the legal guys to operate that the illegal guys got all the cash, you know what I mean? All the protection, because you don't know where they are, and they're not paying none of the taxes. So people are still going to them. Like, listen, it's 4-1 here. 4 illegal sales to 1 legal sale in California right now.
You say 4 illegal to legal?
4 to 1. 4 illegal to 1 legal.
Wow.
That's the sales ratio right now. And on top of that, ease is like 13%. My company is 13% of the state's whole tax yield on cannabis sales.
Wow.
See what I'm saying? So, like, bruh, cannabis is at a critical impasse right now, because it's going to be to that point where these cats can't afford to survive anymore. They're going to need seed funding from bigger guys that's going to just take it from them at some point. So I don't know, bro. I think as we all know, stay away from all the traditional stuff they like to lock us up for, and just stick with the weed. Because you know what I'm saying. I would imagine everything gonna get cranked up a little bit just to counterbalance the loss of bodies coming in. But you know, Trump has been doing a whole bunch of restorative justice talk too, right? A lot of these cats realize it costs way too much for taxpayers to pay $75K a head for a prisoner for a dime bag of weed, unless you just like slavery and the 13th Amendment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's that now. If you're a Republican or a Libertarian, I mean, are you spending your money correctly, or does racism mean more than actually saving some ducats? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just really like that really sweet spot where cats hate to see us in the workplace and hate for us to compete with them, but also realize they're paying for it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're paying for us not to get a fair chance, and that's not benefiting the country as a whole. Because I'm telling y'all right now, we 25th and 29th in math and reading.
Wow.
So we need a bigger crop of people adding some good math scores, because it ain't just the one of you. They ain't that bright.
Yeah.
So yeah, man.
Okay, cool. Well, we appreciate you.
Oh yeah, for sure.
This was really cool, and it was a lot of good information. So I'll follow up with you later if that's okay too.
Yeah, that's perfect, man. I hope y'all have a good Thanksgiving. Wish I was blowing this dank we got out here, but y'all ain't got it like we got it. But yeah, man, good luck with everything, man. Young brothers, you can always reach out to me and holler at me, and I'll let you know if I hear things, that are rolling out and stuff like that.
Okay. All right.
But just start, man, wherever y'all from, just start owning the DC and the PG County cannabis regs. Just start learning that stuff. Okay. And just kind of, internalize it. Then start having, I know y'all got families with, important people that are adjacent to your family. So just start asking your uncle who's a board of commissioner dude, or you just start talking to them about what they think about it. And then if you can, spin it the right way, you get them to empower you to run the play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, fellas.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Peace, man.
All right.